Hi, I'm Jim Eves, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. Today, I'm joined by creative director and head of acquisitions for Evolutionary Films, Ross Boyask. Ross has also directed 5 feature films, including the recent Netflix top 10 films I Am Vengeance and the sequel I Am Vengeance Retaliation. In this chat, we talked about sales and distribution, how the basics work, the best way to make contact with a sales agent, what genres are selling at the moment, and the importance of figuring out what your film is before you start making it. This is a good one if you're about to make a movie and you want to give it the best chance of selling once completed. It's also good if you want to really get to grips with sales and distribution and understand how that process works. Or maybe you want a career in sales and distribution and want to get some inside knowledge. Please make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. Enjoy. So, creative director, head of acquisitions. If I start with some basics for people who don't even know what this stuff is. So, part of Evolutionary Films is they're a sales agent.
Correct.
Could you explain to us what a sales agent is? What do they do?
Yes. So Evolutionary Films, the core business is international sales agency, UK distributor, and we're also a production company and what you would call a production services company. So sometimes we produce and shoot material on behalf of other companies that may be shooting internationally, for example. Or we shoot specific sequences or produce sequences for other companies. The sales agency aspect is, I'll try and keep it simple. The process of acquiring and selling the rights internationally for films. We can do television as well, but primarily it's films. It's obviously independent films. What that means is we do not, in terms of the international side of things, we do not own your film. So we have a contract with a producer that essentially says that we're acting as an agent on behalf of that producer. We have terms, whether it's, commission, expenses, I won't get into all the muck because that'll take pages and pages, but we essentially operate on behalf of producers. We speak to international distributors, meaning a buyer in each territory. Each country is essentially a territory. Some territories are more complicated than that. But essentially, we have relationships with buyers. We present films to those buyers, and we try to secure the best possible offer from those buyers for filmmakers, whether that's an amount of money up front, which is becoming increasingly unlikely in these days, to royalties and so forth.
Sure. Okay. And funnily enough, so your role, and I know you've been on the other end of this, so you've made features in the past and you've probably been looking for distribution, but even the term head of acquisitions gives me a bit of a chill because I just remember the days in Cannes when you'd look through the book and that person, that head of acquisitions person, you'd think they're the ticket to selling my film. So I guess it's, how have you ended up doing that as a role, being a filmmaker and head of acquisitions / creative director?
That's a good question. I'll try and keep it relatively simple, if that's possible. So for anyone who doesn't know, I come from essentially making micro budget movies, well, almost no budget movies, actually. We say micro budget as somewhat inverted commas. And perhaps it's good fortune that the films I make overall tend to be the films that I loved as a kid, I should say, and still love now, that make me want to make films, essentially, which is mostly the action genre. And what happened was we made it over weekends and evenings with friends and, whoever would help us. We took it to Cannes. Now, by this point, I'd been going to Cannes for about 4 or 5 years, meeting everyone, filmmakers, sales agents, distributors, and so forth. We took it, we met with a bunch of sales agents. I'll try and speed this up. The short version of this is we took this film to Cannes. We found a sales agent that we really got on with. They sold it to a bunch of territories while we were looking around, seeing if anyone else wanted to do it, which was amazing. We delivered it to them, and then we did the next one, and so forth. I then started working for a sales agency that I really don't want to talk about, but I met a lot of good people through them, and essentially what was happening in the process of this was I'm learning filmmaking, I'm doing filmmaking, I'm creating assets for film sales and distribution. I'm meeting buyers and other sales agents and so forth, other professionals. And I guess blending filmmaking passion with some knowledge of how the actual business works. It might just be lucky that my passion is commercial on an international level. Maybe that's lucky. I'm not sure. But I enjoy making them. I'd love to make other types of movies too, but I love making action movies, and it turns out that action movies sell all around the world. So there's some fortune in that, I guess is what I'm saying. Some years into that workplace, I and a mutual friend and some other people came together to make Evolutionary Films, form Evolutionary Films, 2014, 2015. And we set out to essentially combine all of those facets.
Yeah. So you made some films. Because of those, you got involved in sort of sales and distribution, and then ended up starting this company. And now you're creative director and head of acquisitions. So in that role, how do you assess a film that lands on your desk? What are you looking at it purely whether you enjoy it? Have you got this market? Is there a criteria? What do you base it on?
It's a good question. Obviously, films come to us at every stage. So if a film's at a script only stage, there's very little point us looking at it. That's not meant with any disrespect. It's just a script. We write scripts too. When a film becomes more, dare I say, of a package, as we would refer to it. So when there's a script, perhaps a director with track record or a really talented director, a cast that is, dare I say it, recognizable. I sound very mechanical. The first thing any film buyer asks when we submit a film to them in any way is who's in it. They ask secondarily, what is it? So the vast amount of independent film typically doesn't have famous people in it. Sometimes they're able to get cameos or whatever. That helps. But typically they don't. So the main thing we tend to look for outside of recognizable cast is, of course, genre. The mainstay for us is action/martial arts. Thriller can work, horror can work, although that market is very niche these days, typically, unless it's a studio film. So we tend to look for, I guess, what makes the film attractive to our buyers, not even to the audience. The audience is a totally different kettle of fish. We look for films that our buyers will be attracted to. Now, obviously, I watch a lot of stuff, a lot of movies. I tend to only focus on the ones where possible, which I feel have some immediate appeal. I will obviously watch other things, like I'll watch the occasional drama or documentary. Most of those do not sell internationally. Comedy does not sell internationally. We have had buyers in the past sit down at Cannes and say, no comedy, no drama, hi. Like they'll say it before they say hello.
Yeah,
that's not actually a joke. That's completely straight. They're not interested. That's wasting their time. So it pains me to say it, but when we get a lot of first time, dare I say, or young British filmmakers make what we would call a kitchen sink drama. And while I guess it's a good exercise and it can have terrific performances and things like that internationally, and I know there's an exception for every rule. There's always an exception for every rule. Typically, we would pass on that immediately. We wouldn't watch it. There's no point.
Yeah.
Because it takes time. People say, oh, it's only going to take you an hour and a half. I'm like, no, it takes about 5 hours to assess a film properly.
It's interesting you say that, because I've definitely seen, I don't know if, again, this may be a generalization, but it sort of feels like our generation at uni left making genre movies, and the generation now is making these kind of more thoughtful, maybe ponderous. Well, it depends what you're into. So it's not what I'm into, but I do see that type of film getting made, and I guess it's just that balancing act of, do you want to try and make some money, or do you want to get noticed and get on the BAFTA list of this and the talent thing of that? And do you know what I mean? What pathway are you taking?
Well, I'm a judging. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it much. I'm a judging person, voter person, on a fairly prestigious British film awards thing. It's not BAFTA. They won't have me. It's up to them. And I have to say, I'm judging debut director this year, which I'm very excited about.
Mm.
And there's been a handful of films that I thought were incredible. And then the majority of films that I've seen have all looked like the same film.
Mm.
I mean, it looks like the same cinematography.
Mm.
Not that that's bad cinematography. It looks like the same performances. I'm not exactly sure how to explain what I'm observing in terms of the storytelling. It feels like everyone came from the same class.
Right.
I mean seminar, you know.
Yeah.
Um and I'm like, well, these 12 movies are the same film. And that's not to say that any of those films are bad films. They're really well made films. But if they got sent to us at Evolutionary, we're just like, no.
Mm.
They're great. Well done. No, there's no international saleability. So the next question is, festival run, does that work? But if someone like me is watching, I appreciate not everyone's like me, thank God. I don't know. I can't recommend those films because they're not interesting. Even if they're well made, like how can I recommend 12 of the same sort of movie?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like the best one of those movies, and then everything else is interesting. And I know how that makes me sound. Hopefully, it makes me sound choosy. But I have to question. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, at some point, I fully expect for our company to be sent most of these movies, and we would be like,
what can we do with it?
Nothing. Literally can't do anything with it. It's not what can we do with it. It is we can't do anything with it because the market is ever changing. The market's ever changing.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, and when you talk about your buyers, are they essentially a pool of people you always go to, or do you know what I mean?
That's a good question.
This person always likes this sort of thing. I'll send it to him first, or
it's project dependent, but genre-wise, that's probably true. We have a pool of buyers who absolutely basically take our action movies. I mean, they'll still look at them. They're not going to blindly accept anything we send them. And we have a pool of buyers perhaps who would be interested in thriller or different genres. And we do sell some drama and some documentary occasionally. We're always on the lookout, but this is now our eighth into ninth year. So we know the buyers. Like we typically know there's always going to be new people occasionally. But one of the things that some people don't understand, particularly new producers, is we all talk to each other like regularly. So it's unlikely that we'll get sent something, but we are mystified. But as in, we're not going to anything we're given. We're not going to go. I have no idea who to send this to. It will be. We can't send this to anybody. At least not from our relationships. Obviously, other sales agents have different relationships. We're just aware. We're just aware of what they're typically what they're looking for. If there is a niche aspect to a drama, possibly some sort of art house, that could work sometimes. The world you're talking about is the reason why any films get made or sold. Not made, sold and distributed. So it does. I do find it remarkable how many films go into production without them even thinking of talking to sales agents or even local, like domestic distributors, because it's going to be easier to talk to a sales agent, quite frankly. A lot of distributors don't want to talk to producers, quite frankly. Usually, not always, but they don't really want to have to deal with the individual. The number of times filmmakers say, "Should we come to Cannes and help you sell film?" We're like, don't do that, because you won't want to hear what the distributor.
Oh, it's a horrible. I mean, I love Cannes, I love going, but it's not nice. When you. I mean, the one time we screened a film, you get that moment where you've got skin in the game because anything you make you're gonna end up paying for. So they're booked a screening, and they'll, like most buyers, only stay for 10 minutes. And you're sat there if that. And if you're sat there as a filmmaker, like, oh, this bit's amazing, they're going to love this bit, and then half of them get up, it's soul destroying. So stay away from that. But I would say actually walking around the Palais and kind of seeing what people are selling and chatting to sales agents and distributors invaluable.
Yes, but making those relationships, yes, I absolutely agree.
Mm.
But what you probably don't want as a filmmaker who may have spent 2 or 3 years or more on making a film is seeing your film in the brochure and seeing a buyer just flick past it.
Yeah.
And then watching that happen 4 or 5 times an hour.
Mm.
You may not want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
It is merciless is the nicest thing I can say.
Yeah.
But there is a reason for that. The buyer who stays for 10 minutes is because they've got another 4 movies to try and watch in the same hour.
Mm.
If you're lucky. So actually it's an argument in some ways for formula. One of the things that I have to sometimes talk to producers about, whether it's when they're just about to start shooting or if they're still in the edit, is it's the first 15 minutes and nothing has happened in your movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to be like every other horror film, right? Do you understand why every other horror film gets sold? It's awful. I don't like saying things like that. I don't want to say everything should be formulaic because I'm a filmmaker myself. I don't want everything to be formulaic. But you have to assume that a distributor is going to fall asleep within 10 minutes if you don't do something that keeps them engaged.
And you've only got to watch any film, haven't you? Any film starts off with something big
Absolutely.
and incredibly loud to get your attention, and it's funny that that's sometimes aimed at the distributor, not the audience. It's crazy.
I mean, you can change your movie 20 ways from Sunday, right? Anyway, but yes, it's about particularly, and this is going to sound really obvious, your first 10 and your last 10. Super important. Yeah. Super important. So it is interesting how many times I have to tell people that, which is fine because happy to advise. Sometimes it's in the script. But again, occasionally I'll read the script, not often, but occasionally read the script. There's also something about a film knowing what it is, like indicating that it knows what it is. Sometimes someone will send a project over. It's a drama, thriller, horror, sci-fi. I'm like, no, stop. What is it? What are you talking about? What is that exactly? You can say sci-fi thriller or sci-fi horror or whatever. When people start putting 5 things into their description, or when people describe a movie, if they can't describe your movie in 2 lines, just to be able to go, I understand what that is. I apologize if I'm sounding condescending.
This is the sort of thing.
This is important.
It is important, and that's one of the things I'd say I learned in Cannes is being able to pitch a film succinctly and see the lights on someone's eyes turn on or off depending on how terrible or good your idea is.
Because you can lose people. These people, you lose their attention within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Just on that subject, have you seen Talk to Me?
Talk to Me. What's it about? What's the premise?
Australian horror film about possession.
Is it the hand one? No, it's
yes,
not.
Correct.
Oh, it is. I haven't seen it. No,
so it's true. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's really enjoyable. But I was listening to an interview with the twins who directed it, wrote it, directed it, and produced it, in fact, and they had the best one-line pitch for a film I've ever heard, which is how they kind of got it going, which was teenagers get high via possession.
Yep, it's ticking all the boxes.
High using possession, or teenagers use possession to get high, whichever. What I'm saying is, immediately your brain goes, "Oh, whoa!" Like even if you don't know what it is, it's a very succinct way of pitching. If you watch a film, it's complex. It's not straightforward. But when you're able to sum up your movie like something like that, using each of those words, teenagers, possession, getting high, you know what I mean? Ping, ping, ping. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's got the hook, isn't it? So say I am a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker.
You are.
I am. So,
wait, did you bring me on this podcast to say, Jim? You are a filmmaker.
That's it. Now I've got that clip forever. So
but you said I'm a filmmaker.
It's official. I've made it. So a filmmaker has got a film. Is there a good way to approach a sales agent? Is there what do I need? I've got to have a trailer. Do I need a poster? Do I cold call you? What do I do?
So, I mean, look, there's so many ways you can do it, but succinct is good. Succinct is very good. So I would say the best way to approach just me, this guy, typically there's 2 ways, but they're sort of the same thing. when I my favorite way to receive anything and let's just focus on completed films here. It's or films that are in post, or films that have just shot, whatever you want to call it, films that essentially are viewable. The best way probably to approach moi would be, hi Ross, if you've got any kind of track record, say, hi, I'm blah, I previously had this on Netflix or whatever, whatever it is. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. But blah, if you have any of that, I've just completed or I'm in post or whatever the stages of this movie. It is like a horror or thriller, whatever it is. Here's a teaser trailer or whatever you want to call it. I would suggest no more than 2 minutes if possible. If you have artwork, oh, and by the way, if you're making movies, get good photos, not behind the scene photos. Get good photos of your cast, really good high res photos of your cast in different poses, so you can make good posters and character pieces and things like that. So ideally, this email would have a little bit of blurb. Here's a trailer or a teaser, or my teaser will be ready to watch in 2 weeks. Like that. That's sometimes helpful. Here's the artwork. All rights are available. Tell us what rights are available. Just helps. Would love to chat more. I'm really worried about how many emails I'm going to get now. But well, we get them anyway. I guess what I'm saying, as opposed to the way I speak, keep it succinct. Keep it a taste. So if this is me, if you have an IMDb link, stick in your IMDb link, that kind of thing. So I can go, because I'm about to click an IMDb link. Click. Teaser / artwork. That really helps, because it immediately gives me, a person who will be trying to commercially exploit your movie, an idea of what this movie is. If you don't know what it is, that's a problem. And actually, that was springboarding me back to a point we were actually touching on briefly about sales agents and producers. I once went to the Edinburgh Film Festival, which was fantastic. I don't know if it's still going, because I know there's been trouble. I went to essentially sort of like a talent panel and a showcase where producers were showing like an excerpt of their film. By the way, all these filmmakers were great. The festival was great. This is not a dig on anyone, but it led to me being very confused about something specific. We had about, I'd say 8 or 9 filmmakers. Their films looked great, like really well shot, really well edited, at least the pieces we saw. And they had none of them had spoken to sales agencies. None of them had spoken to distributors at all. And some of them have spent a few £100,000. And I don't know about anyone out there, but if I'm making an investment of anything, I would want to know something about the route to sale, like the route to the public, but certainly the route to some kind of return on my film. You can't guarantee anything, probably, but some kind of discussion. The first question I always asked was, who's your film for? Because these were all dramas. These were all kind of like, let's just say drama / comedy / whatever, but dramas essentially. These were primarily not genre movies. I was like, who's your film for? And a few people said, we were hoping you could tell us. Yeah, the face you're making is exactly...
The thing about that's interesting.
You spent how much money?
Do you think that part of that might be the people selecting the films for you to watch as well? So are there, the panel that goes, right, Ross and all the other sales agents, we're going to show them a load of films. They're selecting 10 filmmakers. Are they discounting a bunch of horror and action?
It's a fine question. I mean, it is a very prestigious festival. So you're quite right. It's entirely possible that's the situation. And like I say, and however I sound, I'm not having a dig at anyone.
Yeah. It is interesting.
As a filmmaker myself, forgetting my capacity as a sales agent and UK distributor, I was flabbergasted by the idea that a filmmaker would say to me, we were hoping you could tell us who the target audience was for this film.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I don't think they were being flippant. I think they needed help. But to get that far in the process, for me sitting there, it sort of tickled my brain.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because I can see, but totally see both sides of those. So from someone who's only ever made horror movies because I think I believed, oh well, at least they've got a shot of getting released.
Yeah.
But also maybe try not to be so commercial that I don't make something I love. So these people obviously love what you described as the sort of kitchen sinky stuff almost as much as you love your action. So it is that balance, because when you've got to have a lot of stamina and a lot of energy to make a film.
It's hard to make a movie.
It's hard to make a movie. So if you're going to do that, it's got to be something you love, but at the same time having that on your first feature, having the thought to sort of stop and go, hang on, is anyone going to buy this? Who's the person who's going to watch this, and where are we going to sell it? You know,
I would just say, just step back. I mean, okay, look, I can say, and maybe again, perhaps it's fortune, I can say I'm the target audience. I know that in today's market, Ross Boyask is not necessarily the mainstream audience for whatever movie. I'm in my late 40s, male and all of that stuff, and I'm not going to get into gender politics necessarily. There's a lot going on in the film industry right now. I know that I'm not necessarily the most mainstream target audience. Maybe I am, actually. Maybe people are lying about what they're marketing to these days. But taking that out of the equation, what we can say is, well, the John Wick films are successful. Nobody was successful. I don't know if Expendables 4 is going to be successful, but it's a big action movie, and there are plenty of independent action movies still out there that are getting out through fairly major labels. So it's a relatively straightforward proposition to take a step back, see what films are coming out, whether you like those films or not, and say, okay, my movie that I'm going to make, all being well soon, my next one, all being well, fits into a certain level of movie. And that's not meant with any disrespect to any other movies. And again, I'm a sales agent and distributor, so I have some understanding of the business and the market as ever changing as it is. I have a capacity, at least, and my partners certainly do. John Adams, our CEO, and Diane Shorthouse, my MD, certainly have the ability to assess where this film will fit. And certainly our buyers will tell us as well, for sure. When it comes to an indie drama about, I don't know, a boy and a girl who meet, and dare I say, the typical story, or boy and a boy. Well, it doesn't matter what the mixture is these days, to be truthful, as long as it's well written and well acted. But when it comes to that, and you don't have famous people in it, just take a look at what films are out. Just take a look. And then at least you're able to say to people, well, our film it may not be the same as, but there are some comparisons. Look for comparison titles, is I guess what I'm saying. And look for comparison titles in the last 6 months, last year, max, because things change a lot. So go and make a Christmas movie. Christmas movies are always fairly well looked up. Go and make a movie about a dog at Christmas.
A dog, yeah.
Oh, for real. Make a Christmas dog movie. Make a Christmas dog movie where the dog helps someone become a better person.
Yep.
You'll sell that movie.
Does the dog need to talk or not?
You see, I want the dog to talk.
Yeah.
I always want the dog to talk. The dog could talk, or the dog could have an interior monologue.
Interior monologue's going to be cheaper, isn't it, than a little
Much
mouth.
cheaper, and you could get you can probably get some sort of name of some description to spend an hour in a recording booth.
The dog, right?
You could even make one of my favourite films of all time. I'm saying this somewhat facetiously. There's a film called A Talking Cat with a question mark.
Nice. A
Talking Cat, and Eric Roberts voices the cat.
Of course he does.
And it is wonderful.
Wonderful. It sounds great. I'll link in the description. I will put that on there so people can watch that.
Add a talking cat.
A talking cat. Love it. So before I move on to writing and directing, 2 more questions. Give me the top 3 genres that are selling the best at the moment.
Action, and action.
Action, and action.
I mean, action, thriller, and horror. Horror's a tough one. Horror sometimes works. I would suggest going more physical with your horror, like a good slasher movie, rather than like a ghoulish, like a zombie or or a supernatural movie, they're not so hot always. We could get into the weeds on this one. Horror does have fans, so horror is not a bad shout. But take a look at what horror is out there, particularly if you're essentially making a no to micro budget movie. Have a look at what's out there before engaging, because some of these subgenres just don't exist really anymore.
Okay. And the last one on the sales and distribution side, Netflix. So obviously they've been around a while now, but they always seem, to the filmmaker, like a bit of a closed shop. Maybe I'm interpreting this wrong because it's been a while since I've had a film to sell. How do you find them? Because obviously your last 2 movies went onto Netflix. Do they just talk to sales agents? Are they a closed shop? Am I imagining that? What's the...
I'm so sorry. I've got what appears to be a motorcycle chase happening outside my apartment right now.
It's Netflix.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's on the telly. What is going on? I'm sorry. Right, it's East London, guys. Sorry. So I think closed shop is a relatively appropriate phrase. We have a fairly decent relationship as a sales agent, but what people need to be aware of is that just getting your film on Netflix is not the be all and end all. It shouldn't be the thing you aim at initially necessarily, unless you're able to get an incredible offer from them, sort of thing. They should be part of the equation for sure. And undoubtedly a streamer will be part of your equation. It's not necessarily the be all and end all.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is, if you're a filmmaker, you could go down a sales agent route, but maybe there's this fantasy version where Netflix just buy it and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
That's possible. You may still have to go through some kind of official route, whether it's a sales agent, whether it's a UK distributor, or sorry, a domestic distributor, I should say, that will have a relationship. So it's possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible. I don't want to sound too negative.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it's a tough one to get on the platform, but I guess it's one of the only platforms at the moment. So if you stick something on Amazon, you're just kind of in a sea of nothing, really. And I guess maybe it's a popular. You're not going to get on Disney Plus, so what other options have you got? So yeah, it's an interesting one. So moving on to the directing stuff. Sure. You've convinced me on action. You've sold me on action, because I was going to say to you, why action? Now I know. But isn't action really hard on that? Like, talking back to your micro budget stuff, isn't it really difficult? Aren't you? I find it difficult trying to do the blood and the guts stuff. So isn't punching even more risky?
It's a very good point. Well made, because I hope I don't take it for granted what I'm able to deliver as a director, but I'm only able to deliver what I do because of a team. So it's about having great action people around you, whether it's the performers, the coordinator. It's always better to have a coordinator who is something more of a storyteller. There are different types of heads of department, all who have their strengths. Some people do the job and keep people safe, which is great. But maybe don't try to think about how to phrase this most diplomatically. So I guess what I'm saying is some stunt performers are really great at what they do, and they're great at keeping everybody safe, and they deliver their work, and that's fantastic. There are other stunt coordinators, and by the way, I shouldn't just say stunt coordinators. This can be the same for any heads of department, whether it's special effects, costume, anyone really, who are more involved in telling the story. So they're more interested in who the characters are, what their backgrounds are, how they would then interact with other people. How can we do this stunt in a different way? How can we perhaps film it in a different way or show it in a different way, depending on how much time we have and resources and so forth. So here's the weird thing. I don't think of action as hard. Because the first things I ever filmed were fight scenes in my back garden, and they were primarily with my friends and a camcorder, and they were primarily because we would watch films at that point. This was pre-internet, kids, so we would watch VHSs frame by frame, and we would say, okay, in that fight scene, Jackie Chan, we didn't know the terms like close up or whatever, two shot or whatever, or panning or whatever. We would just see, okay, it's his face, and we see his fist, and he's throwing a punch, and the punch goes out of frame. And then we cut to a wide. I'm using terms which we didn't understand at the time. There's a wider shot, and the punch starts again by the back of his head. It's not where it was before. And then the whole punch goes, and the guy gets hit. And when you watch it normally, it looks like one punch. So we would copy that. And that's how we started doing things. And it's still sort of how I do stuff today.
That's not comforting.
But in a hopefully in a more sophisticated fashion. But I guess what I'm saying is that's to do with overlapping action. If you don't know how to overlap action, your action will look quite stilted because people think that comes with the editing as well. It's not just the way you shoot things. So just as a little tip, when we film an action scene, and very rarely do we shoot them in order because we'll shoot depending on the angles and stuff. So we might shoot the action very out of order, but we know what we're shooting. But you always, let's just say you were shooting in order, you would always make sure that at the end of shot one, you would then have the characters move into the next, whatever the next action is, whether it's throwing a kick or running, well, it doesn't matter what it is, but just keep them moving. And then in the second shot, you then go back to the previous move and do it again. So therefore, everything flow, or it should flow. I hope that makes any kind of sense.
No, that does make sense. And then let me ask you about something I always spot in an action movie. And this is your hero comes into the room. There's 5 guys in there. There's a fight between 5 guys, and there's always one guy who's not doing anything during the fight. He's he's been hit and he's sort of staggering until he's ready to go back into the fight. How do you avoid that? Is there a term for that, or do you just have to keep your eye on it and go, hang on, you don't look like you're doing anything, you're just kind of stood in the background?
I'll make a half joke and call it laziness. It's about keeping track of everybody. You can't always say, one of my favorite extras of all time, and I say extra, it's probably a stunt guy, is we just watched the remastered Enter the Dragon 4K 50th anniversary. Go and see it at the cinema while you can. It's amazing. There's an incredible bit. You've presumably seen Enter the Dragon?
Oh, yeah.
Right. The end battle where it all starts kicking off with like dozens of guys attacking Bruce Lee and John Saxon in the tennis courts, as they were. There's this incredible shot where Bruce takes out a bunch of guys and he ends up kicking a guy 4 times in the face. Bam, 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 and the guy drops, and it's awesome. And directly behind that guy is like a line of bad guys kind of, in theory, ready to run in and start doing damage. And they're all laughing and smiling. They're almost like, did you see what he did? There's literally a guy whose jaw kind of goes like that. He's my favorite background guy of all time, and I will watch that again. If I could get his face in high res, I would make that like a wallpaper on my phone. Like, I just love his jaw drops. Like, do you believe it? He just did that. It's amazing. They're all laughing. And then when you cut to the battle, when you see the battle going on in all these ways, so many people are like play wrestling and laughing and kind of like cuddling and stuff. It's amazing. I still love every moment of it. But you kind of go, and some of them are being dead serious and laying into each other. You know, it's wunderbar. Yeah. So the guy in the background, shoots your scene well. Like, sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes you just don't see it, and then you just have to minimize it in the edit. Sometimes you just don't notice it. You move very quickly, you get on with it. Ideally, what you want is everyone to be on point and doing their stuff. And if you realize something's going on with that guy on the shoot, you figure it out. You either shoot around him or whatever, or you tell the guy, just look like you want to fight. Just stand there. But you're right. That's something you see in loads. The new John Wick film. Let's have you got an hour? John Wick 4, which everyone says is the most amazing film of all time. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. There are so many people just standing about. So many, because the fights go on for so long, and also everyone's bulletproof. So I don't know where to begin anymore with that film. I'm going to make some enemies.
All right. So you've done your micro budget ones, done a couple more features. You're in your first. Talk to me about the first day on I Am Vengeance. You've got a big budget. You've got a wrestling star in the lead. What's that like? Are you crapping yourself? Are you kind of, how does it feel that first day?
So on day one of that shoot, you're right. My previous films had essentially been micro budget to mostly no money, sometimes a little bit of money, but basically no money, with very enthusiastic people helping. A lot of professionals too, but just saying, I was very fortunate. So this was my first day on a set, with a real crew. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to the people who worked with me before. This was a crew being paid by the producers to service the film, right? All lovely people, of course. And there was a moment, we had our like, hi everyone, chat, which was good. We were filming outside a cafe, around the back of a cafe. And fortunately, the very first thing we were filming was a bit of running. So for me, that's good. You know what I mean? And it did occur to me as I'm sort of standing there and things are kind of hustling around. I was suddenly like, there's like 70 people here, all running around, all got jobs, all being told by heads of department what to do. As it, I'll tell it, I'll give my opinion on whatever, of course. And I just had to kind of go, all right, then. That's kind of what I had to go, all right, then. And that's actually the catchphrase of the hero, funny enough. In the movie, he says it a few times. All right, then. And weirdly, that was what kind of went into my head. And I just sort of got on with it. Like, it was a very, I'll be honest, I could see a version of myself going, what am I doing? I never felt like that, but I didn't actually ever, question the process of what I was doing. I don't know if that speaks to my psychopathy or whatever. I was very grateful for everyone's contribution, of course. It just sort of, once I had that little moment, there was so much hubbub going on for just a minute, and I felt like I was in the middle of like everything going on and on and on. But once I had that little moment, it just, everything essentially felt correct. I hope that makes some sort of sense.
Yeah. No, that does. I can imagine what.
And then it kind of just, and then to be honest, you're chasing the daylight, so there's no time to actually. There's actually no time to be like, oh, can I do this or anything like that. I never, from that moment on, I really didn't have any doubts about that.
You mentioned the Asperger's. Is that how I pronounce it? Asperger's.
I've been diagnosed very recently with Asperger's, yes.
Right. So do you mind me talking about that? Or
no, not at all.
No. So you've recently been diagnosed with Asperger's. I wondered how that impacts you on a day-to-day basis with dealing with people, and if it's set you back at all, like not knowing you had it, or, what actually does it involve?
It's good. I'll try and keep it relatively concise. So when I got diagnosed, I won't get into how that came about because that's just a whole thing. I primarily wanted to get diagnosed or not, primarily for the people who I'm closest to and the people I work with closely. Because for people who don't know, there's obviously certain, I'm trying to think for right things that I, just for myself, do that I'm not aware necessarily that have happened. So this includes sometimes you shut down, for a better way of saying it, and sometimes we have what you would call a meltdown, which some people might just think is a tantrum, and it can come across that way. And I've always been kind of, that was something I was never actually aware of, because sometimes I thought I was almost behaving that way, and people said, "No, you're all right." So that was a bit weird to me, but okay. When I disclosed to my closest friends, my oldest friends, I should say, by the way, I should probably just tell you, I've been diagnosed with Asperger's. Two of them were just like, yeah, like we just know you as you. Like it doesn't really, and I wasn't necessarily expecting anything anyway. That's the point. I'm trying not to be that person who goes, I am a special case because
treat me differently. Yeah.
I mean, just to be really clear, I got diagnosed when I was 48 years old. So not a lot is going to change in terms of my behavior. But what I'm grateful for is the ability to communicate that to people now, and to somewhat, not always, somewhat be a bit more aware of how my behavior might be coming across to people. I'm not always aware of it. And it explains a lot about the specifics that I require during communication. A lot of the times when someone asks me a question in general life, I will normally say, "What do you mean?" And it's not that I haven't actually understood the general nature of their question. It's that I want the specifics of what they're asking in order to best answer it, not to tell them what they want to hear. But when someone asks me, so the typical question is, how are you? And my honest answer is, I don't know. 99 times out of 100, if I'm honest, because I used to say, okay. And that's not how I feel. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. So I tend to need more specifics. That's obviously a very general question. Yeah. If people say to me, what do you think of? I will normally respond with, how do you mean? Or what aspect? Yeah. Because then I'm better fixed to give a more specific answer. Sure. So funnily enough, I have been thinking about this in relation to filmmaking. I haven't been on a set yet since my diagnosis. When I think about how I behave with people, one of the things, and perhaps this isn't always conscious, but one of the things that's probably most going on in my head when we're filming are the specifics. So my requirement for specifics in the context of making a film are usually justified, I think, as in whether it's an angle, whether it's a delivery. Well, not that I do very much of that. I don't normally give line readings to people, but I might have a take, whether it's how things are lining up, how the blocking is going. The specifics have always been important to me, in as much as I want other people to contribute those, like actors and so forth. So my hope is that when I next go into the next one, fingers crossed fairly soon, that my communication or perhaps the way I perceive things hopefully isn't much different. But that perhaps I'm more aware of how my behavior will, or how my ability to communicate will play on set. I don't think I've actually had any problems before. There have been a few occasions where I've asked an individual on set, like, to make sure everything's okay. Yeah. Very few, okay, just occasionally, because I'd expect someone to tell me, and it's usually been fine. And bearing in mind, this was before I had my diagnosis, so this was not about me going, am I being all Asperger's-y, without sounding silly. It was usually about making sure I was understood. So it's going to be, sincerely, it's going to be an interesting experience going into the next one. Because now that I am aware of that situation, what my intent is that it doesn't hang me up in any way.
Cool. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you, Ross, for joining me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'll put links to Ross's projects in the description so you can check them out for yourself. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the Honest Filmmaker podcast for more career advice from people in the business.